Hey everybody, welcome back. Danny on Everything. I am your host, Danny Bedrosian. With me as always is Mr. Carl Cerny. Turning the knobs, twisting the buttons, doing all the things that need to be done. Fearless producer here at Alcom, Tallahassee, Florida, Moose Magnificat, also known as. And I'm super happy. We are doing a great interview this episode with Mr. Mark Mustian. He is attorney, author, former city commissioner, and the forerunner and founder of the Word of South Festival in Tallahassee, which combines literary arts and musical arts together into one massive community event. It's been going on for 11 years. I'm super proud to be involved in it this year and last year, which leads me to some of our shows we have coming up. We're going to talk about a little bit first about some of the stuff I have coming up right now. Coming up the most soon is actually a very special, I think it's called the Funketeers Splashdown, and it's going to be hosted by Robin Denson Austin. Robin is the host of a great show called Robin's Circle of P. It's a Sunday morning P-Funk radio podcast that she does every week. And Robin and Anthony Davis, very good friends of mine, massive Funketeers, celebrating their union of love, their marriage, and we're going to be having a big party with all the P-Funketeers coming from all over the world, really. And there are still tickets available. I believe it's TonyCamEntertainment.com that you can get the tickets from. You can also go online and check on Facebook. There is an event up for that as well. But it will be March 15th. The show begins at 7 p.m. It's in Fort Lauderdale at the Dello Hotel, in the big room there at the Dello in Fort Lauderdale, and that's March 15th. So check that show out. It's going to be really fun. Something Fierce is playing, and we're doing a very rare set of P-Funk favorites and some of my solo tunes, all curated and requested mostly by the great folks, the Funketeers, that are coming to this show. So it's going to be an awesome show. In addition, Something Fierce has another one just a few days after that, March 23rd at 926 in Tallahassee, Florida. We are playing with the great Ed Larson, our good friend Ed from Last Podcast on the Left, Last Podcast Network, and The Brighter Side, and many other fantastic podcasts like Side Stories and some other great shows. Ed also has a fantastic stand-up comedy career, and he's going to be on his Florida tour, finishing up in Tallahassee on March 23rd, and that'll be at 926, Club 926 in the evening. And I'm really happy because Something Fierce will be celebrating our 20th anniversary at that show. It's really hilarious and crazy and serendipitous because Ed had asked me about doing the show, and it's almost 20 years to the day that Something Fierce played their very first show, opening for none other than Ed Larson at the exact same venue. It had a different name back then, but the exact same venue. And so it's really apropos. We're coming full circle 20 years later, 20th anniversary of Something Fierce, March 23rd. In addition, March 29th, Danny Bedrosian and Secret Army. We are performing at the Reed Freely Festival in Columbia, South Carolina, about noon, doing a very special curated set of P-Funk rarities from the 70 years of P-Funk, doing a really cool curated set of different songs throughout the history of the band, and that's with myself, Lige Curry, and Benzel Cowan. On April 5th, I'm super excited to be performing 3 events that day at the Word of South Festival, which is put on by Mr. Mark Mustian, who we will be interviewing in this episode. First, I'm playing with Mark indoors, doing a reading of select portions of his newest book, Boy with Wings, and I will be playing musical interpolation, musical interpretations to his passages. And it's going to be a really special kind of fusion of literature and music at the festival that is the fusion of literature and music. So it's super apropos. I think that's going on at about 1 p.m., if I'm not mistaken, that day on April 5th. Then later in the day, Secret Army opens for the main stage at Cascades Park. That's at 6:45 p.m. And then the headlining act, Danny Bedrosian, featuring George Clinton and members of P-Funk. Very, very big 70th anniversary of P-Funk music, doing a very special curated set that's never been done before of music from the whole 70 years of the P-Funk band. It's also going to feature Mr. Lige Curry, Benzel Cowan, Kevin Oliver, Batavian Lewis, obviously myself, and obviously Mr. George Clinton, Longinu Parsons, and many, many others, so you don't want to miss that show. It's going to be a big, big show. In addition, there's going to be some May dates in Colorado that I'm going to let you guys know of very, very soon with two groups, Soul Patch and Lige-a-Delic, Mr. Lige Curry. In between that, there's also some P-Funk dates running from April 25th to May 7th and then May 14th to May 28th. They are in the West Coast and the western portion of the U.S., and then the East Coast and the Midwest, respectively, in those two sections of time. On June 7th, Secret Army plays the ARP Festival in Woodstock, New York. It's going to be a big deal. It's going to be really cool. Check it out. And then in July, we have another tour coming up in the Southeast with some residencies at the Great Blue Tavern in Tallahassee as well. So look out for that stuff too. We got more dates in September, October, November, and December coming up, and we'll let you know as soon as they do. I want to remind you guys the newest thing that's out, my wife Batavian Lewis's album, The Red Balloon. Red Balloon, both the album and the poetry book are out. This is Batavian's brand new album that I produced. It's probably the finest thing I've ever produced. I'm very proud of it. You can get it now for $25 for each. For $40, you can get the Sons of the Sun Ultimate Collection. This is the graphic novel detailing the first 3 issues with a lot of extra back matter. It's 106 pages. This is for $40. And you can still get, anywhere books are sold, or from me directly, the authorized P-Funk song reference. This is my book that came out in September of 2023. Has become a bestseller with Rowman and Littlefield, now Bloomsbury Publishing. And I'm happy to say there will be another book coming out in October. And we'll be telling you first all about it right here on Danny on Everything. You can get any of these items by sending the money for each one to my Cash App, which is $Danny Bedrosian, my PayPal, which is info@DannyBedrosian.com, or my Venmo, which is @Daniel Bedrosian. So I hope you guys check that out. Without further ado, we're going to move on to the interview portion of the show with fantastic guest, Mr. Mark Mustian. So I hope you guys enjoy it. You're checking out Danny on Everything. We are back, Danny on Everything. I am super proud today to be joined by Mr. Mark Mustian. Mark is an attorney, author, also former city commissioner in Tallahassee, and the founder and forerunner of the great Word of South Festival, which I am so proud to be a part of both this year and last year. Mark is also a best-selling author. He wrote a great book called The Gendarme about the Armenian Genocide several years ago, and is now, has just recently put out Boy with Wings, fantastic book, which I've actually read both of these books, so I might have lots of questions for Mark. But Boy with Wings is the newest book that just came out. It takes place in 1930s in the South.
Yeah.
And Mark, so thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Danny.
I really appreciate it. Let's go back to sort of the beginning, and let's get an idea of Mark, where you come from, and like sort of what your roots are, and a little bit about your upbringing.
Yeah, so I'm a native Floridian. I grew up in Florida. I was born in Panama City, and my father was a hospital administrator. So we moved to different hospitals. We were in Gainesville. We lived in Houston briefly, and then moved to Tallahassee when I was 6. And so I grew up in Tallahassee and went away to college at University of Florida, and then went to law school there. Worked in Jacksonville for a few years and moved back here in 1986. So
Okay.
I've been in Tallahassee ever since.
Wow, nice. And you know, I thought for the longest time, because there's if I'm not mistaken, a wing
Oh, yeah.
of the hospital named after your father.
Yeah.
And I remember telling my wife one day, she was like, "So Marky's an author." I'm like, "He's everything. He's got a wing of the hospital named after him. He got all kinds."
No, that's not me.
And then later I just said, "Oh, it's his dad."
Yeah,
I told her it's
exactly.
his dad. So he worked in medicine.
Yeah.
Like hospital administration.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And you are an attorney.
Yeah.
So what got you into law?
Well,
Kind of
it was
different sides of that.
Yeah, I don't. It's interesting, and in terms of being a writer, a lot of writers knew at age 12 or 13 they wanted to be a writer.
Sure.
And I didn't. I always wanted to be a lawyer, and I am one.
Yeah.
So I don't know in terms of I think my parents helped sort of push that in that direction, that it was sort of aligned with my skill set, that I could I could write well, could communicate well, and so that's so I ended up as a lawyer. And, sort of the way I became a writer was that I had been a lawyer for about 10 years, and my practice was and still is, our clients are spread around Florida. And so at the time, I spent a lot of time on I-10 and I-75 by myself. And so I remember thinking, I'm 10 years into being a lawyer, got to be more than this. And so I thought about, I'd like to try and do a few other things. And so I said, I'd like to maybe teach, like to maybe run for public office, and like to try and write a book. Mm-hmm. And so eventually I did all of them. And I taught for a couple of years at what was then Tallahassee Community College. And that was kind of enough to cure me of wanting to do that. It was okay, but the class was like started with 100 kids, and then it shrunk to 50, and all the exams had to be graded at the same time. Mm-hmm. And then in a fit of insanity, I ran for public office and was elected. And I served for 10 years. And I'm glad I did it. Glad it's over with. But about that same time, I decided, well, I think I want to try and write a book. And so I later saw somebody refer to this as the equivalent of waking up one morning and saying, well, I think I'll go practice thoracic surgery today.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I had no idea what I was doing. I was very fortunate to get that book published. But it sort of, I discovered that I liked it. I liked the creativity of being a writer, and I liked trying to improve my skills, and I felt like I had some measure of talent. And so we're 3 books in now, and glad to still be doing it.
Wow, 3 books in. So am I missing? Which one is the first one?
So the first book was this one I'm talking about that I wrote as it was called The Return. And it was published by a regional press in Florida in 2000, the year 2000.
Okay.
And so it was the story of a black woman who claimed to be Christ returned, and this reporter that followed her around and tried to see, and so I had cause to look back at it a few years ago, and parts of it I'm saying, man, this is pretty good. And then parts I'm going, I think I've improved some since then.
Yeah, sure.
But I think the concept is still a fascinating concept.
Definitely.
If you're a Christian, Christ wasn't exactly what people were expecting round 1.
Exactly.
So why would it be the same round 2?
Yeah.
So I and I played a little bit with that in Boy with Wings, because there's a religious element to that book as well.
Definitely. I was gonna say, you work really well around topics of race, religion, politics, genocide, antebellum, social dealings between the majority or the people in power and the others. Right. There is definitely a sense of otherness, both in the Gendarme and in Boy with Wings, and I just think it's so interesting that attorneys have become many different things. What is it? 95% of the U.S. presidents have been attorneys. What is it about lawyering, for lack of a better word, that you find beneficial to writing? Because there is a definite correlation, I'm sure.
Well, no question, and you're trained as a lawyer to see both sides of an argument, and that everybody has a story, and so it's helpful as a writer, because what I try and do is put myself in the shoes of these people, the characters, whoever they are. How would I feel if this were me? Even sort of the most vile character has some reason for doing what they do, and so that's that's a large part of I think the help of being a lawyer and being a writer as well.
Right. I mean, I find it so fascinating what you do in the various aspects because I, like you, am also multidisciplinarian.
Right.
We're both authors, but I tend to write more nonfiction. Even the comic books that I write are mostly nonfiction-ish. So it's always fascinating to me because, the world of law is very much grounded in reality and searching for facts and truth. Um, a novelist spins a web of fantasy while still, but in your line of noveling is it more kind of fantasy but with a real static historical significant part to it,
Right.
Gendarme, did that come out in 2014?
2010.
2010, okay, gotcha. So when you wrote The Gendarme, again, searching for the truth, right?
Right.
And why don't you give the audience a little bit of background to your connection to the subject material, and how that has changed over time?
So, my name ends in IAN, just like yours does.
Right.
And so I had been told my whole life, really, that, oh, well, we're Armenian somewhere way back there, and nobody really knew. And this was pre, 23andMe. And so I, just decided, well, what happened was having a party at my house. And somebody asked me, and I've been asked periodically, oh, you must be Armenian, and blah, blah, blah. And this guy said, have you ever read this book, The Black Dog of Fate?
Oh.
And I said, well, no, I hadn't. And so I picked it up and read it. And it's Peter Balakian's book, which is just a monumental piece of work.
Yeah.
And it sort of got me, I didn't know much about the Armenian genocide. And so it kind of got me interested. And, I said, well, I'd like to at least learn more about this. And so I said, well, I'll do some research and maybe I can come up with a book out of this. And so I read, and interestingly enough, at the Leon County Public Library in Tallahassee, they had oral histories of survivors of the Armenian genocide.
Yes.
And so, which are riveting, harrowing, difficult things to listen to.
Of course.
And just, and so I and this is maybe a longer story than you want to hear.
No,
on this,
of course, please.
So I set to work on the book, and I decided I would have sort of a present day piece and a historical piece. And so I wrote the book. It took me a number of years to get to that point. And at that point in time, it's still a way, to some extent the same today, you had to have an agent to get a book published.
Mm-hmm.
My first book I managed to get published without one, but I was trying to, hit the big time. And so I had a friend here in Tallahassee who's a writer who had an agent. And he said, well, I'm glad to refer you to my agent if you like. So he did. So I send the manuscript on to the agent, and he calls me and says, hey, I was only going to read 15 pages of this, and I wound up reading the whole thing.
Oh, in one sitting.
Yeah, and he said, the historical part is awesome, but he goes, the present day part, you need to change the whole thing.
Oh.
And so I'm like, oh my God, so I've worked on this for years, but
Wow.
I went back and changed the entire, sort of structure of the present day part of the story to make it where it's sort of the same guy. He's in the present day part. He's 92 years old. He's and he had an injury in the war, and he's having these memories come back, and they're memories of him being a gendarme,
Mm-hmm.
which was a Turkish policeman that was escorting Armenians out of Turkey at the beginning of World War One.
Mm-hmm.
And so I spent rewrote the whole thing, sent it back to this agent, and he goes, well, I think I'm just not excited about it enough to do it. I'm like, oh my God, after all that.
Wow.
So, but I kept that version of the book because I liked the way that turned out. And I managed to get an agent finally and to get the book published. And I recall with my agent, we had sort of, he'd asked me to send him the manuscript. We sort of, traded voicemails. And I was at a party one night, and my phone rang. It's a New York number. So I think I know who this is. So I step out. I said, well, hey, I got your message. I understand you like the book. He says, no, Mark, I love the book.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, oh, that's been waiting a long time to hear that. So the book ended up getting published in 10 languages. And I got, invited to go to Armenia.
Yep.
I went to Venice and spoke at the book fair there. So I'm very proud of the book. And, the number one reaction I got to that, and I'm sure you've heard this, Danny, as well, is we have no idea that ever happened.
Oh yeah,
You
sure.
know, and people just, it's been, whitewashed by the Turks. It's been, it's out of sight, out of mind,
Right.
and so it's, I feel, some gratification for bringing at least, to the maybe a different way to the public that, hey, this is this is what went down back
Yeah.
then.
Yeah, and I wouldn't discount the one drop, if there is the one drop in that DNA of yours, because you did a fantastic job. And as someone who is a descendant of survivors, I was raised by 3 survivors, and they always talk about transgenerational trauma
Right.
with the genocide. If you were raised by one genocide survivor, you have a certain level of transgenerational trauma. So I was raised by 3. So my grandfather and 2 of my great aunts,
Wow.
and one of my great aunts lived to be 106, and she's the one who saved him from, because where they lived, most of the escorting was really death march,
Oh,
and
absolutely.
or all of the escorting, I should say. But a lot of the villages also suffered to outright massacre.
Right.
So they didn't even get out. They just
Right.
killed.
Well,
And that's
particularly the men, I mean,
but even the women and children,
Yeah, yeah.
a lot of, especially the villages, cities had to make it look like it was a deportation.
Right.
But in the villages where most of the Armenians lived,
Right.
it was just outright massacre. They would kill women, they'd kill children, the whole thing. So it was really nice to see, first of all, a Tallahassean, a Floridian, writing a book on the subject matter when at the time Florida had not yet even admitted
Right.
to the genocide. And I'm happy to say that I was on the House floor, when they passed that in Florida, and I was the sole Western Armenian on the House floor, so the sole descendant of genocide survivors to be there for that. And I think it's things like your book that help illuminate. Now, granted, this was internationally received,
Right.
but again, the locale, the center, the regional centerpiece always plays a part in helping to illuminate people's minds. Because like you said, most people said they hadn't even heard of it.
Right.
And again, that goes with the United States' long-held alliance with Democratic Turkey after Ataturk in the 20s. And
Right.
they, again, trying to whitewash the whole thing, and Turkey pivoting to the West, and that leaves Armenia where. And so it was very nice seeing something like this. And, you really have both the advantage of the IAN and the advantage of the for lack of a better word, Odarness, as the
Right,
Armenians would say
right.
it, to be able to present a perspective that is viable socially to both parties. A lot of Armenians can't always do that, and a lot of non-Armenians don't usually do that.
Right.
It also is very evident in Boy with Wings,
Right.
which I loved. I haven't read a novel in years, and it was the most fantastic piece of historical fiction that I've read in a very long time, Mark.
thank you.
I really
Yeah.
enjoyed it. Without giving away too much, just the boy's relationship with his mother in the early period, and the independence that came with the transition out of that
Right.
moment and into the various places that he ends up. My favorite, probably the circus, the chapters dealing
Right.
with this, is just the characterization is brilliant. And you do a really good job dealing with this. It's an epic nature. The book Boy with Wings could almost be compared to something like Beowulf, or even on the Armenian level, David of Sassoon, because they touch on the factors of the flawed hero,
Right.
right? The perfect hero doesn't have a narrative that anybody cares about, but the flawed hero, the hero that's cast aside, the hero that's cast away, and I guess without reading your first book, it also kind of
Right.
relates to The Return,
Yeah.
right? And how this otherness, this castaway, this person that's supposed to be segregated from the rest of society for whatever reason, holds a more important role to play.
Well, and it, so I tried to touch the place that, people have asked me, sorry, well, the book is a lot of, if there's a core theme, it's about what does it mean to be different? You
Yeah.
know? And so people have asked me, well, Mark, sorry, let me get this straight. So you a white male born in this country in this time period to parents who loved you and paid for your education. What do you know about being different?
Right.
But I tried to touch the place. I think everybody knows at some level of being on the outside and looking in.
Yeah.
And no matter who you are, you've experienced that to some degree. And so, if when you read the book, or I hope everybody does, that it's structured in a certain way where the main character Johnny, the boy's passages are written in a third person voice.
Yes.
And some of the other characters are first person voices. Yes. And I did that intentionally. And I had some people question that, and I even tried to change it around to see if I felt like it worked, and I went back to the way I had it originally because I wanted to sort of, amplify that sense of otherness. That at some level, some people think Johnny's an angel, some people think he's a devil.
Yeah.
People's different reactions to him, I hope, shows you a little bit about him. And so anyway, that was sort of a different way to go about it.
Yeah, I really like the way that you pivot. It vacillates between narrative and monologue.
Right.
So you'll be reading and he'll be in this kind of tight spot, and then it transitions to the next chapter to the person closest to him in that moment, kind of talking about what's happening with it, what's going down, and from a whole different perspective. And again, going back to something you said earlier, being able to see from multiple viewpoints, and being able to see both sides, like you're saying about being an attorney, that's all plays into Boy with Wings. And it plays into the way that you really, to me, it's such a genius kind of vacillation between, we're feeling this boy's pain and angst, even though it's not told from his side. He's the main character. You can feel that he's the main character. And then to just kind of switch over to, I've read a couple books that play with that idea, but you kept it thematic all the way to the end. The second to last chapter also does. So it's great how it runs right into that. And
I had way late in the game in the book, I said, well, I'm going to try it with the very end being from his point of view. But even that, I didn't like it. I just wanted to keep it the way I had it.
Yeah, because in a way, his, for lack of a better word, his kind of unique soloness, him being one, his singularness, gets lost in the sauce if you hear him talking about it.
That's sort of that was the reaction I came. Then he's kind of becomes like everybody else,
Right, and
you
don't want
the whole point.
Yeah, the whole point is to show his otherness. Yeah. I just thought it was an amazing read, and I was gonna bring my copy of the book. We will put a graphic up that'll show the book and where people can get it. But my oldest daughter currently is reading it, and she took it with her to Jacksonville for break. So I was like, but yeah. So it's getting more love in the house now. So more people will read. My wife will probably end up reading it too.
Good.
It deals with a lot of really, much like the Gendarme, touchy, controversial, maybe not controversial, but touchy subjects of race and nationality and difference in the South, in the American South.
And particularly, so again, if you're a white male writer, and you're writing about race in the South, it's not an easy thing to do. And what I find is a lot of writers will sort of cast the African American characters as perfect characters. They're the good guys, and everybody else is a bad guy. And I tried to make these African American characters real.
Human.
They have flaws. Some of them aren't super nice people. And so that was a, But on the other hand, there's a point in the book where where Johnny, who has these, these strange things on his back, tells this African American friend, says, well, hey, I know what it's like to be black. And the black guy says, you may think you do, but you don't really know.
Yeah.
And I think that's, again, no matter what I do, how much I try to get in somebody's shoes, I can never completely get there. I mean, that's their experience. And so,
And there's a duality of that in that same book with without getting into too deep, the freaks.
Right. Yeah.
And each one of their self-reflection, their introspection into their own minds of what they are, what they look like, and how comfortable or uncomfortable they are with that reality.
Which I think is, so I did a lot of research on that.
Yeah.
And and it is, it's, you sort of think, oh, they'll all be sort of the same. Oh, no, it's very different.
Yeah.
I mean, some of them are very grateful to be in a show like this. I mean, otherwise they're hidden at home and, with families that are embarrassed by them.
That's right.
And then others are, this isn't what they want. They want to blend in, and they'd rather, even if it means doing X, Y, or Z, this isn't what they want to do.
Right.
So it's a strange dynamic all the way around,
Yeah.
including the people that are fascinated by this, and everybody. I say everybody. I mean, a lot of people still are.
Yeah.
And it's easy to sort of things that you don't understand, or things that seem oh, this is something weird, and people are, interested by it and then frightened by it.
Yeah, sure. Oh, that's just, I mean, it touched on the historical realities so well, and it's just such a good book. I highly recommend everybody check out Boy with Wings and The Gendarme and The Return. Now I'm going to be checking out that one. I'm going to be going into that one now that I know there's another to read.
Cool.
Mark, let's talk a little bit about this amazing festival that you've come up with, and it is your baby. You're the forerunner of it. Word of South. Before I let you go on, and I want you to kind of tell like how this came about and what was the process in building it. But before I do, I just want to kind of let everybody know from my perspective, without giving too much, as a musician who's lived here for 22 years, and one who came from New England, I was disheartened in general most of that first 22 years with the ability to do things on an artistic level in Tallahassee proper. Obviously, tons of talented people in Tallahassee, musicians and artists and painters and writers and you name it. But not a lot of great viable options for those people to do anything. More importantly, not a lot of viable options for outside talent to come through here on their tours or on their speaking engagements or whatever. And I noticed from being on the road for 22 years, because I've spent half of my life in P-Funk, and half of my life also in P-Funk while living here in Tallahassee. In that time, I've always said, we need a centrally located theater-style district downtown where festivals and clubs and people can form a line out the door, and it has like this feeling. I said there's cities like Fargo and Harrisburg, Pennsylvania that have this, and we don't. We're much bigger than those places. Right. And upon discovering Word of South, I was just, and I'm not saying this because you're here. I would say this to somebody else in your stead if we were talking about Word of South. It really, for me, was the very first time I said, yes, this is what it's supposed to be. This is what it is everywhere else. And it's legitimate and organized. And so before we even go on, I just want to hats off to you, sir, thank you for bringing something so important to families in Tallahassee and people who want more out of their community. I think that you have like exponentially risen the bar on that. So I've embarrassed you enough. Now let you talk about how this came about and when did you? I know it's been 11 years, right?
Yeah. It was actually longer than that because we started a couple of years before that.
Okay.
So I guess the roots of it go back even further. So Cascades Park itself. Okay, so I was a city commissioner. When I ran for office, I remember we did a video from the top up near where the Edison is now.
Yeah.
Looking down on what was a barbed wire, brown field. Okay, you couldn't get in, keep out, this sort of thing.
Right.
And so it was one of my campaign, things was, hey, look at this, we need to, let's do something, let's fix this. And so we did. We passed a sales tax and we, converted it into, and I'm very proud of the park. It's really what we hoped it would be.
It's gorgeous.
It is, it's a functioning stormwater facility. It is a host to, a number of events. The amphitheater, when the weather's good, knock on wood, is a wonderful place.
Yep.
And if you go there any time of the day, any day, there are people of all walks of life using it. And so it's really a successful venue. And so anyway, while I'm on the commission, the Gendarme is published. And I get invited to speak at a number of literary festivals around the country, which I'd never been to. And so I'm thinking, man, these things are great. I mean, they're free. There's all these people here. They're into books. It's just wonderful. So we ought to do something like this in Tallahassee.
Right.
And then I I said, well, I need to get off the commission before I mess with all that. That's too much conflict and work. And so as I got off and I thought about it, because I said, man, this is going to be a lot of work to pull this off. But I said, well, let's give it a shot. And so I had a core group of people, and we talked about, so rather than just being the Tallahassee version of the South Carolina Literary Festival, why don't we try and do something different? And so we talked about, well, you could combine books and politics or books and the environment. But we said, well, kind of the easiest thing to do would be books and music.
Right.
And so we hit on that idea. We worked for 2 years. We raised all this money. We had an absolutely awesome lineup the first year of the festival, 2015, at Cascades Park, and it rained all weekend long.
Oh.
And so things got canceled. We weren't quite ready for all that. I mean, we had the author Ann Patchett, and she ended up doing her event in a room about maybe 10 by 20 with people standing and raining outside, and
No.
but it was still, even through all that trauma, it was enough to say, I think we've got something here.
Yeah.
And so when we started it, I thought I'd kind of be involved for like 5 years or so, and then I'm out of there, and I'm still there.
Yep.
But I'm proud of what we've done, and it's really, there is nothing like this in the country. And it's a huge, unique thing for Tallahassee.
Yes.
And the most gratifying thing to me is people will come up to me at the festival and go, oh, yeah, we come down from Atlanta every year. We drive up from Cocoa. There's nothing like this.
Yeah.
And so what we've tried, and the things I'm proudest of that we've done there are the sort of the unique things, like what we're going to do this festival with Danny and George Clinton, and the 70th anniversary of George, performing as a professional.
Yep.
And I mean, where else will you see that?
No,
Nowhere.
Nowhere else. Yep.
And so we did a tribute to Nat and Cannonball Adderley that was just out of this world.
Tallahassee natives.
Yeah, we had these guys come down from Muscle Shoals to do this tribute to Arthur Alexander. I mean, that was awesome. And so we had the historian John Meacham with this guitar phenom Yasmin Williams. That was awesome. So it's really my goal at this point is to just it's sort of like the trite statement, keep Austin weird.
Right.
Just keep this a little bit on the edge.
Yeah.
We want I don't want it to be different. I don't want it to be, we've been there, done that, same old.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're trying to be innovative and do different stuff every single year.
I mean, it really shows. And again, I've only been privy and lucky to be active in the past 2 years, this and last year. And just to see, again, you're right, there's book festivals around the country, book fairs, there's literary festivals and things, there's music festivals, but there's nothing that combines the two, especially in the way that it combines them too. It's the concept and the theme and the overall feel that sets this festival apart. And I mean, like I said before, just to go from a city that in my opinion was underperforming in the arts to becoming like the best thing that's happening in Tallahassee, to the point where it's a thing that's not happening anywhere else. Now Tallahassee has something unique to claim, in the arts. And I just think that's like so wonderful. I also want to mention, and I'll be saying it in the intro as well, but Mark is going to be reading excerpts from Boy with Wings, right? And I'm super proud to be playing alongside you on the piano and doing some intermittent, pieces in between that match the feel of each mood of each piece of the book. So
yeah, and we've done this a lot at Word of South. Actually, we call them wash-ups. So they're music and author mashups, but it almost 100% of the time it's worked super.
It's kind of unprecedented.
Well, and it's what we've discovered. If you put creative people together, people ask us, "What do you want us to do?" Do whatever you want. You guys figure it out.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times it'll be people that have have never met before.
Yeah.
I mean, Danny and I will probably never have rehearsed this. We're just going to go
right,
do
we're
it.
Just gonna do it.
Yeah. And so it's a and I think people respond well to that. It's just something different.
Yeah, I agree with that, and it's just like a really cool idea that you just don't see everywhere else, and I agree with you on the different artistic people, different creative people, putting them together, because in my world a lot of the musicians only hang out with other musicians, but then there's a few special ones that you look at their clique, like myself for instance. Most of my like I have buddies that are stand-up comics, podcasters, comic book artists, actors, fine artists, and it's not like it's not just all musicians. And a lot of times when you put two of those different things together, suddenly all this amazing stuff happens, and you have like really the coming together of like a mini renaissance, if you will, that unfortunately this stuff is not fused in the way that it should be so often. If we look at where the arts come from and we go all the way back to classical times, all of this stuff was combined, from theater to even politics and art and music, and all of this stuff had a real connection, the culinary and everything. And today we sort of separate it all. So to see something that really puts it all together in a way that's community-based is just amazing. We're not closing it off. It's not gatekeeping. It's available for everybody to see. And I just think in a place like Tallahassee where so much has been held down for so long, it's just a really wonderful
thanks. I mean, we try, we're going to take some chances. So we're doing something this year. Speaking of political, we have a couple of political journalist commentators.
Oh.
And we're going to pair them with Del Suggs, the local musician.
Yeah.
And these are people all over the political spectrum here, and we'll see what happens.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah,
nice.
So I think we had a call about it today. I think it's going to be cool.
I love that. Yeah, I love that kind of stuff. I mean, anything to open up the forum.
No, exactly. And get people to think of it in a different way a little bit. And it's sort of like, back to the books. I mean, the best historical fiction to me, really any fiction, operates on multiple levels. So there's the story and all that, and then there's sort of a higher level that makes you think. Like one of my favorite books from last year was a novel by a British writer named Zadie Smith called The Fraud.
Okay.
And it was a historical novel, and my wife read it after I did. And I said, well, tell me after you read this book, what do you think The Fraud is?
Oh.
And to me, it could be 6 different characters, 3 different circumstances. It's a brilliantly done work on multiple levels.
Wow.
And so that's sort of, again, it's a little bit like the festival. We want this to work on different levels for different people. If there's a design to the festival itself, the closest thing I've found is probably the New Orleans Jazz Festival, because this is multiple stages working, some simultaneously. So you pick what you want to go to. If something's too crowded, you can go to something else, or you can camp out here and get the best seat for the next 3 shows or whatever.
Yep.
So it's again, it's just, we try and mix it up.
Yeah. I would say that it's even more cohesive than something like New Orleans Jazz Festival. As someone who's played New Orleans Jazz Festival many times, it's still a little more central and kind of you have a lot of options, and you don't have to drive somewhere to go to them.
Well, and one of the challenges for us is not to get too big.
Yeah.
I mean, we could be like South by Southwest and grow ourselves out of existence.
Right, sprawling.
So right now we're in a really good position where we have good crowds. You can still see a show from very up close.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful setting, and even if it rains, we've got backup venues that we move people out and show goes on.
Yep, that's fantastic. And it's going to be on April 14th through 16th. Is that correct?
4th through the 6th.
I'm sorry. I'm thinking about something totally different. 4th through the 6th. April 4th through 6th of this year. Forgive me. I got too many shows on the mind.
I understand.
But it's going to be an amazing weekend. Fantastic. And there's just so much stuff going on. We have... who is it? That's doing with the Tallahassee Symphony Orchestra on
Violent
Femmes, right? Yeah. Okay. Violent Femmes and the Tallahassee Symphony, which is a really special thing. And as you mentioned, we're also doing this unprecedented. It's the only one of its kind. I'm happy to say. I'm surprised nobody has jumped on this bandwagon, but it is the, as of now, only 70th anniversary of P-Funk's show to be done this year, and this is the 70th anniversary of the band. It started in 1955. It's 2025, so
it's all wild.
8 decades.
So we had a good time last year where we had George and Danny and sort of a choreographed set that played along with your discography that you had out.
Yep.
And so I think this is going to be bigger and better.
Yes.
It's going to be a party here.
Yes, and we're doing even more stuff. We're doing an even bigger kind of spread of music, and it's still like 60% stuff that's never been done before. And I even am doing one song that ties in a touch to Boy with Wings.
Really?
In that set. So we can talk about that later, but it's kind of a funny correlation. But Mark, it's such a pleasure having you on. I would love to have you back anytime.
Sure.
This has been a real pleasure. Everybody check out Boy with Wings. We're going to show you guys a graphic of the book and how you can get it. Also read The Gendarme. Check out Word of South in Tallahassee, Florida, April 4th through 6th. This is the man who was the forerunner of the whole thing, and we're super happy to have him on. Mr. Mark Mustian, thank you again.
Thanks, Danny.
And you've been enjoying, I hope, Danny on Everything. It was a fantastic honor and a privilege to have Mark Mustian on. Such a great interview, such a great person to talk to. So much going on and just such an interesting individual and working in so many different fields. So glad to have him on, especially with Word of South coming up. Remember, we got big shows coming up. March 15th, the Splashdown, Funketeer Splashdown, Fort Lauderdale, Dello Hotel. March 23rd, 926. Something Fierce 20th anniversary in Tallahassee. March 29th, Read Freely Fest, South Carolina, Columbia with Secret Army. And then Word of South itself, April 4th through 6th, and including a 70th anniversary of P-Funk show with myself and George Clinton. So, you guys, like, follow, and subscribe. Hit the bell so you know when new videos are available. We're trying to make it to that 1,000 subscribers. We still got a ways to go. Please support, let your friends and family know about this show so they can like, follow, and subscribe as well. Check out my Patreon. It's patreon.com/Danny Bedrosian, where you can get all of my music, books, comics, everything, art, and so on and so forth every month. If you join at any level that suits your financial need, and you will get all the stuff that I'm making the best way that you possibly can through my Patreon. Once again, thank you to Carl Cerny, thank you to the Cerny family, everybody at Moose Magnificat, also known as Alcom. You have been experiencing, listening to, hearing, maybe smelling, tasting, Danny on Everything.